They ridiculed her, interrupted her, and tried to ruin her reputation. Now, it's them asking for forgiveness. Karoline Leavitt had dealt with tough interviews before. Pushback, especially from liberal media, was nothing new. But this time was different. This wasn't a political debate or even a heated exchange. It was a calculated, deliberate attack. She had been invited onto the talk show under the pretense of discussing policy. That's how it was presented. But the moment she sat down, she sensed the shift. The atmosphere wasn't the usual clash of ideology, so it felt like a trap. The first few questions were standard fare. But then, without warning, one of the hosts leaned in, their tone sharper than skeptical. "Let's be honest, Karoline. You're not here because of your qualifications. You're here because of your loyalty. That's why you got the job, isn't it?" Gasps and murmurs filled the studio. A few audience members even laughed. Karoline's expression didn't change, but inside, she recognized what was happening. This was no interview. It was an ambush, and she was the target. She drew a steady breath. She wouldn't give them what they wanted. "I'm here because I've earned my place," she replied calmly. "If you disagree, let's talk policy and not personal attacks." But they didn't want policy. They wanted a reaction. Another host smirked and turned to the audience before delivering the next jab. "I've never broken a bar or hand it, because from where we're sitting, it looks like loyalty is the only real qualification these days." The crowd applauded. Karoline knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about disagreement, it was about humiliation. For the next several minutes, the interruptions, the mocking laughter, and the leading questions came non-stop. Everything she said was twisted, dismissed, or reframed. The show wasn't about debate. It was about domination. Still, she held her ground. She responded with facts, refusing to give them the outburst they were so clearly pushing for. As the segment neared its end, a final insult landed. "Women like you set us back. You're just a porno, and deep down, you know it." The room fell silent. Even the audience didn't know how to react. Karoline clenched her jaw not from anger, but realization. They didn't believe their own words. They weren't attacking her out of conviction. They were attacking her because they were afraid. She smiled slowly and deliberately. "If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it," she said. "But at least I'm not a puppet." The segment ended. The cameras stopped rolling. The damage, or so they thought, was done. But they didn't anticipate what would come next. Clips from the interview spread like wildfire. Within hours, they were everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, and every major conservative news outlet. At first, the network tried to shape the narrative, editing the footage and labeling it a spirited debate. But the full, uncut version surfaced, and it told a much different story. Conservatives weren't just upset. They were furious. Comment sections exploded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even those who weren't staunch Karoline supporters couldn't deny what they had seen. They hadn't interviewed her. They had tried to humiliate her. #stranded, #media bias, #stand with Karoline, #cancel the show. Republican politicians weighed in. Conservative commentators dissected the footage frame by frame. Even a few liberal voices admitted it was a bad look. But the outrage didn't stop at angry tweets. Viewers got strategic. They bombarded advertisers with emails, demanding to know why they were supporting a show that openly mocked women for their politics. Some companies ignored the noise. Others issued vague, non-committal statements. Then, a major sponsor pulled out. Their statement was carefully worded to avoid controversy while making it clear they didn't want to be linked to divisive, unprofessional discourse. That was the first domino. Others quickly followed. The network scrambled. Anonymous sources leaked stories of chaos behind the SNIZU executives demanding answers, emergency meetings, and PR consultants working overtime. At first, the hosts remained silent. Then, a lukewarm statement emerged, talking about passionate discussions and differing viewpoints. It was too little, too late. Karoline hadn't said a word publicly. She didn't need to. Then, rumors began to circulate. She was preparing to sue EA not just for defamation but for targeted harassment and possibly coordinated media misconduct. This wasn't like previous backlash the network had faced. This was different. In a dimly lit office in Washington, D.C., Karoline sat with her legal team. Documents were spread across the table, some still warm from the printer. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. One of her attorneys, a veteran in media litigation, leaned back and said, "The defamation case is strong. But we also have a claim for professional harm. This wasn't just unfair. It was deliberate." Karoline nodded. She wasn't impulsive about legal battles. But this wasn't about ego. This was about principle. And the deeper they looked, the worse it got. Internal emails had been leaked. The segment hadn't been spontaneous, so it was orchestrated. One message stood out. Make sure she stumbles. Cut her off if she gets too comfortable. That wasn't journalism. That was sabotage. By morning, it was public. Karoline Leavitt was suing the network. The network called it frivolous and politically motivated. But the damage was done. This lawsuit wasn't just about one person anymore. It was about media ethics and how certain voices were treated on national platforms. Advertisers kept pulling out. Ratings plummeted. Viewers left, right, and center started asking the same question. If the network had nothing to hide, why were they panicking? Then came the shocker. A former producer stepped forward first anonymously, then publicly. In an exclusive interview, she confirmed what many suspected. The show had a pattern of ambushing conservative guests. She brought receipts, emails, memos, and even raw footage showing years of manipulated segments. The network could no longer spin it. Inside their headquarters, panic turned to despair. Executives barked orders. Legal teams scrambled. PR specialists flooded inboxes. But it was too late. More whistleblowers came forward. More documents surfaced. This wasn't just one rogue segment. It was systemic. Then came the biggest revelation. A former senior staffer testified that it wasn't limited to one show. It was network-wide. Certain guests were targeted, silenced, and discredited, all to maintain a pre-approved narrative. What started as a lawsuit became a full-blown crisis of credibility. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Outside, media vans, protesters, and supporters filled the streets. Karoline sat beside her attorney as focused and composed. Her team presented the evidence, emails, video comparisons, and testimonies. The defense tried to argue it was entertainment. But the jury saw the difference. Liberal guests, uninterrupted, respectful, softball questions. Conservative guests were cut off, mocked, and set up to fail. Then came the financial records. Proof that Karoline had lost endorsements, bookings, and professional opportunities because of the segment. This wasn't political anymore. It was legal. It was ethical. In closing arguments, the tone was unmistakable. This was about media accountability. The jury didn't take long. When the verdict was read, Karoline remained still. In the matter of defamation and professional harm, the jury found in favor of Karoline Leavitt. Gasps, murmurs, shock. She simply said, "It's not about silencing those you disagree with. It's about accountability. The media should report reality and not manufacture it." The message resonated. Her career didn't just survive via its sword. She became a symbol of resilience, of integrity, of standing up to a media machine that had gone too far. And her final words still echoed, "The truth always comes out."